There are new bombshell claims today from royal insiders who say King Charles's cancer is incurable and he will likely die with the disease.
Something shifted inside Buckingham Palace today that no press release could fully contain. A statement, quiet, deliberate, and unmistakably final, came not from a government minister, not from a palace communications team, and not from the king himself. It came from Princess Anne. And when the Princess Royal speaks with that particular kind of measured gravity, people who know the royal family well understand that what follows is not speculation. It is confirmation. This morning, Anne broke what had been weeks of suffocating silence and delivered the words that the institution had privately been bracing for. The abdication process, she confirmed, was complete. Prince William was preparing to lead. To understand the full weight of what Anne said, you have to first understand who she is within the family. Princess Anne is not given to drama. She does not perform emotion for cameras. She has spent more than 5 decades in royal service with a discipline that even her harshest critics are forced to respect. She carries out more royal engagements per year than almost any other working member of the family. She does not speak carelessly, and she does not place herself at the center of palace news cycles unless the situation demands exactly that. When Anne speaks with formality and finality, those around her know she has already exhausted every other option. That is precisely what makes today's confirmation so profound. She did not choose to do this lightly. She chose to do this because the alternative, continued uncertainty, had become more dangerous than the truth. The context surrounding King Charles's health has been building for months. Since his cancer diagnosis became public knowledge in early 2024, royal watchers, constitutional experts, and palace insiders have been quietly tracking every sign of his condition's progression. There have been extended periods away from public duties. There have been reshuffled schedules and cancelled engagements. There have been briefings to senior government officials that went beyond the usual routine. And there has been, above everything else, a growing sense within informed circles that Charles's ability to carry the full weight of the monarchy was becoming increasingly limited. Not because of a lack of will, everyone who knows the king speaks of his determination, but because the body has its own authority, and illness does not defer to duty. Royal insiders have been telling select journalists and constitutional observers for several weeks now that the conversations inside the palace were no longer about whether a transition would happen, but when and how. The machinery of succession, which exists precisely for moments like this, had been quietly activated. Meetings between senior aides, legal advisors, and members of the Privy Council had begun to take on a different tone. Documents that once sat in preparation were being moved forward. And throughout all of it, one figure remained the steady, unsentimental hand guiding the process toward an honest conclusion: Princess Anne. Anne's role in this transition has been, by all accounts, both personal and institutional. On a personal level, she has watched her brother, her king, navigate the most difficult period of his life with the same stoic resolve she recognizes in herself. She has been close to Charles throughout this illness. She has accompanied him to appointments. She has sat with him through difficult conversations. And she has been, according to those familiar with the family's private dynamic, one of the few people capable of speaking to him with complete honesty. Not cruelty, but honesty. The kind that only comes from someone who loves you enough not to protect you from what is real. On an institutional level, Anne understands the monarchy with a clarity that is almost architectural. She knows that the crown is not a single person. It is a system of trust, continuity, and expectation. When that system is seen to waver, the public doubt that follows is not merely sentimental, it is constitutional. People need to know who holds authority. Government ministers need to know who they are serving. Commonwealth nations need to know who represents the head of state. And when that question goes unanswered for too long, the uncertainty compounds. It does not stay contained within palace walls. It spreads outward, and it weakens the very institution that the royal family has spent generations trying to protect. This is why Anne acted. This is why she delivered her confirmation today rather than waiting for some perfect, painless moment that was never going to arrive. She knew, as she has known for weeks, that the kindest thing she could do for her brother, for her nephew, and for the monarchy itself was to draw a clear line and speak plainly across it. William received word of Anne's confirmation before it became public. According to those close to the Prince of Wales, his initial response was not relief, and it was not triumph. It was something closer to grief wearing the expression of resolve. William has spent his entire conscious life preparing for kingship in the abstract, knowing, intellectually, that the crown would one day pass to him. But abstract knowledge and lived reality are two entirely different experiences. The moment the succession becomes not a future event but a present fact, everything changes. The weight becomes immediate. The responsibility stops being theoretical and starts pressing down on actual shoulders, actual days, actual decisions that will affect real people's lives. Those who have spoken with William in recent weeks describe a man who is deeply serious about what lies ahead. He is not approaching this as an opportunity. He is approaching it as a duty that arrived through loss, his father's loss of health, his family's loss of the life they had known, and his own loss of the quiet distance that had always existed between him and the throne. William understands that leading the monarchy well will require everything he has. It will require the institutional knowledge he has been accumulating for decades. It will require the emotional intelligence he has worked hard to develop. And it will require the steadiness of the woman standing beside him, because Catherine's role in the next chapter of the monarchy is not decorative. It is foundational. Catherine, Princess of Wales, has herself been through a period of profound difficulty, having navigated her own health challenges over the past year with a privacy and composure that drew widespread admiration. Her return to public life has been gradual and deliberate, and it has revealed something important: she has not emerged from that experience diminished. She has emerged from it with a kind of quiet authority that is increasingly difficult to ignore. People inside the palace and outside it have begun to speak about Catherine not simply as a supportive figure beside William, but as someone who brings her own form of leadership to every room she enters. When William needs to find his footing in a moment of uncertainty, the people closest to him say it is Catherine who most reliably helps him locate it. The question now being asked in political circles, in Commonwealth capitals, and in the quiet offices of constitutional lawyers is, what does this transition actually look like in practice? Abdication is an extraordinary event in British royal history. The last time it occurred in any formal sense was in 1936, when Edward VIII stepped away from the throne before his coronation. The circumstances then were entirely different, driven by personal choices that scandalized the establishment of the time. What is happening now is something altogether different. It is not driven by scandal. It is not driven by a failure of duty. It is driven by a health crisis that has placed a moral limitation on a man who, by every account, would have served the crown for as long as his body permitted. Charles is not choosing to abandon his role. He is being guided, by those who love him and those who serve the institution, toward a conclusion that everyone privately knows has become inevitable. The formal mechanisms of such a transition involve a range of constitutional and legal steps that do not happen overnight. There are instruments to be signed. There are notifications to Parliament. There are briefings to the Commonwealth realms, each of which has its own relationship with the Crown and its own process for acknowledging a change of sovereign. There are conversations with the Prime Minister and senior members of the Cabinet. And there is, at the center of all of it, a family trying to hold itself together through a process that is, by its very nature, a kind of structured grief. Princess Anne's confirmation today accelerated that process in the most important way a confirmation can. It made denial impossible. Once the Princess Royal has spoken plainly and publicly about what is happening, the space for ambiguity collapses. The palace cannot walk back what Anne has said. Government officials cannot pretend the information hasn't reached them. And William himself cannot remain in the liminal space of air and waiting any longer. The confirmation was, in that sense, a gift, even if it was an uncomfortable one. It forced everyone, inside the palace and beyond, to stop pretending and start preparing. There are voices within royal circles who have expressed quiet concern about the pace of the transition. Not because they doubt William's ability, but because they worry about what rapid change does to the internal cohesion of the royal household. Transitions of power, even well-managed ones, create winners and losers in terms of proximity and influence. Staff who serve Charles closely will find their roles shifting. Officials who are used to working through one set of channels will need to build relationships through new ones. And members of the extended royal family who found their place in the existing order may need to renegotiate where they stand. None of this is catastrophic, but all of it is disruptive, and disruption always carries the risk of fracture if it is not managed with care. The one figure in all of this who has attracted perhaps the most sympathy from those watching closely is Camilla. The Queen Consort built her place in royal life over many years against enormous public skepticism, and she has served alongside Charles with a dedication that ultimately won significant public respect. Her future role in a monarchy led by William is, as yet, unwritten. Those close to her say she understands the situation clearly, and that she has always known the shape of what was coming. But understanding something intellectually and living through it emotionally are, as Charles himself has discovered, not the same experience at all. Camilla has been, by several accounts, dignified in the face of a transition that has personal cost for her, and that dignity deserves to be recognized as its own form of royal service. What does William's monarchy look like? That is the question that historians will eventually answer, but the early signals suggest a reign that will be defined by a combination of tradition and evolution. William has shown, in the causes he has championed and the way he has engaged with the public, that he understands the monarchy must remain relevant to people's lived experience. He is not interested in a version of kingship that exists purely as pageantry. He wants the institution to do something, to matter, to connect, to carry genuine weight in the national conversation. His work on mental health, his commitment to environmental causes, and his increasing willingness to speak plainly on subjects that previous generations of royals might have avoided all point toward a sovereign who will not hide behind ceremony alone. At the same time, William has shown that he understands what the monarchy's continuity requires. He is not a revolutionary. He does not want to dismantle traditions that have taken centuries to build. He wants to carry those traditions forward in a way that makes sense to a 21st century public, and he wants to do so with Catherine beside him in a way that feels modern, humane, and honest. The early shape of the next reign, as described by those who are watching it form in real time, is one of disciplined purpose. Not the kind of grandeur that seeks applause, but the kind of steadiness that earns trust.